Thank you very much for coming this morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Dan Brady, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues, Representative Tim Butler, Representative Mike Murphy, and Representative Tom Bennett. Representative Avery Bourne, who is a member of the Property Task Force Committee, was not able to join us this morning. But we were all members of the Property Task Force Committee, and this is the third in three press conferences, one that occurred in Chicago, and then one that occurred in Rockford, and one now obviously in Springfield and Central, and trying to talk about downstate Illinois, because of the fact that we felt it was important to reach every sector of Illinois, of the people of Illinois, to talk about what our concerns have been and continue to be in regards to the Property Task Force, Relief Task Force. We wanted to talk about our shared disappointment in the task force and the process and results, and our commitment of what we've worked towards to the state. And when it comes to property tax, this crisis that is occurring in the state of Illinois. I, like my colleagues here today, were hopeful when the Property Tax Relief Task Force was created. We were going to create a working group that was going to, in a bipartisan fashion, work together for the people of Illinois on this crushing property tax burden that's driving families out of the state of Illinois, from their homes and obviously from across the state. Unfortunately, the task force, through Senate Bill, which is Senate Bill 1932, is just one more example of the Democrat-created Blue Ribbon Commission that has failed. Rather than bringing forward substantive changes and suggestions that would provide relief, the Democrats' so-called reforms focused on expanding the sales tax base to raise even more money without promising to reduce the property tax burden. And even our governor, Governor Pritzker, said that was a bad idea recently, just last week in a Chicago Tribune interview. My Republican colleagues and I brought ideas to the table that would have eased families' property tax burdens. Almost all of our ideas were dismissed by Democrats who controlled the task force. Our request to call the full task force together prior to the final deadline so we could have an opportunity to debate and consider the initiatives that were brought forward was denied. I think, as well as my colleagues here and others, that Illinois families deserve better. At this point, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Representative Tim Butler, who's going to talk about the process a little bit further. Tim?
Thank you, Leader Brady, and good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Butler. I'm a state representative of the 87th District. I live here in Springfield. This task force, I believe, has been flawed from the beginning. This was an 88-person task force. There really weren't any parameters set, and it was really, from the beginning, has been flawed, I believe. And I'd like to remind people, let's not forget why this task force was created. A few members of the majority traded their votes for the progressive income tax to have an 88-person task force impaneled to try to study the issues surrounding property taxes. I wish I could say I was surprised at what's happened so far, but frankly I'm not. We've only had 3 overall meetings of the task force. There's been multiple subcommittees, but there's been only 3 overall meetings of the task force. And as I said, having an 88-person task force is kind of ridiculous. In recent weeks, hopes for a substantive final report were diminished, and the fact there was little or no chance for members of the task force to debate and contribute to the final product. The draft proposal from or I don't know even if it's draft, the proposal that was forwarded from the Democrats to the Republicans during the holiday season has not gone back to the full committee, missed its deadline as of December 31st. It runs contrary to the standards that we have in place for committees and other things that we do here in the House and the Senate. We know how to work committees. We know when things go to subcommittee, they're supposed to come back to the full committee for consideration. That was never done here. And what has happened is that means they have ignored many of the recommendations that Republicans have talked about. Things such as greater local control, for greater local government control, enhanced transparency on our property tax bills, including informing taxpayers of the cost of litigation and things like that. Expanded property tax relief for seniors is something that we've talked about. And certainly something that gets talked about a lot is how we approach consolidation of government entities. I think we've heard a lot about consolidation over the years, and that's an important process, important part of this process, but we need to do it in the right way. I think I really wish that the Democrats were serious about getting to the bottom of property taxes. I think all of us here today, and probably every member of the General Assembly, hears on a daily basis the concerns that our constituents have with property taxes. It's not a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's an issue across every single district that we have in Illinois, and I wish the majority would get serious in trying to work with us to find some answers on how we can get to the bottom of that. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague from Springfield, Representative Mike Murphy.
Thank you very much, Tim. You know, as Representative Butler pointed out, the Democrats so determined to push a narrative that the state needs more revenue to fix the property tax problem instead of recognizing the most basic but fundamentally important thing we need to do. We need to get out of the way of our local governmental bodies. You know, over the past several years, the state has been averaging 8 unfunded mandates per year for municipalities and 6 for school districts. How can we expect local government to create cost savings that lower the property tax burden when the state, led by the General Assembly Democrats, keep mandating new and costly programs year after year? And we tell our local governments and our school districts they have to pay for them by themselves. It just makes no sense. State government has to finally recognize that the Illinois is a large and diverse state, and we actually put controls back in the hands of our local governments to decide what will or will not work for their community. You can guarantee the cost will come down. Let us also not forget that the state has to fulfill the commitment to local communities to be the primary funder of our schools, but we never are going to have that happen until we get serious about reforming state finances. Every year, the Audit Commission finds millions and millions of dollars are wasted, but the Democrats in the General Assembly never have joined the Republicans in policy suggestions to cut that amount of waste. In fact, they keep passing bills to make the state spend more money without ever coming up with a way to pay for it. The state doesn't need more money for general revenue, and what it needs to do is come up with a way to fulfill their obligations. And yes, that means making hard decisions to cut programs that don't work instead of coming up with more unnecessary ways to cut money and then tell local governments and school districts it's their responsibility to pay for it. It's time for Illinois Democrats in the state to get out of the way and stop telling local governments how to spend their money. The Democrats' never-ending narrative of more state taxes to fix the property tax problem is definitely not the answer. With that, I would like to introduce my colleague, Tom Bennett.
Thank you, Representative. Thank everyone for being here today. I had high hopes when I was named to the Property Tax Relief Force, or the task force. I hope that after so many years of talking about things and reading things in the newspaper and hearing the discussions, that we're going to finally get going on something and actually make something work out of this. A lot of good ideas were brought up over the course of the discussions, so I was disappointed that so many of them did not make it into the final report, which was circulated really at the last minute. There was little time for input, little time for review, and really little time for discussion. An issue this serious, which affects every person in Illinois, deserves serious consideration. But this task force produced no real reform, no relief, just more of the same. The House starts off in the spring session here in about 2 weeks. The issue of property tax is going to remain a critical issue of importance to the people that we represent. We have to do better. I'd like to go back to Representative Brady for closing. Quick, if you would.
Thank you, gentlemen. As we close, let's take a look at Illinois' history of failure with property tax relief task forces. All have failed to produce results, and this latest task force is just one more example of the controlling party failure to deliver real solutions to the state's most pressing issues. Our state's history of failed task forces is long, going all the way back to 1975, when lawmakers approved Senate Joint Resolution 10 and 8 more failed task forces. 1982, the Tax Reform Commission. In 1995, the Equity 95 Property Tax Classification Task Force. In 1997, the Electric Utility Property Task Force. In 1998, the Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission on Property Taxes. In House Resolution 527, which instructed the House of Representatives Revenue and Finance Committee to conduct an investigation into ways to improve property tax assessment practices across the state. In 2009, the Property Tax Reform and Relief Task Force. This one sounds very familiar, doesn't it? In 2018, the TIF Reform Tax Force. And the 2019 Property Tax Relief Task Force now joins the list of squandered opportunities to address one of Illinois' most pressing problems, the property tax in the state of Illinois, driving people out of the state of Illinois. Through all of this, has anyone seen a legitimate drop in their property taxes? And we all know the answer to that. The answer is no. As I said, the people of Illinois deserve better, and we pledge our support to try and do that, to work together in a bipartisan fashion to come up with real sustainable property tax relief in the state of Illinois. It can be done.